New vital chapter of American history is being written right now as we speak, and joining us to talk about it is Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace, who's also taking a look back at another historic era in his new book, Countdown 1945. How are you doing, Chris, and welcome back.
Well, I'm doing great, and I'm delighted to be with all of you. I've been listening to the first half hour, and during the break, as I told Sonny, I learned more about defund police in her explanation at the top of the show than I've learned in the last 2 weeks.
It's kind of amazing, and you've been a reporter for 50 years. With everything you're seeing happening across the country, are you hopeful that a change is coming that will be beneficial to the whole nation?
Well, when you're talking about race relations and police, I hope there's change. I hope that there's reform and improvement, but I can't say I'm especially hopeful that it's going to happen. Whoopi, you and I are, I guess, roughly the same age. You know, you remember 1968, you remember Rodney King,
Yep.
You remember Michael Brown in Ferguson, you remember Eric Garner in New York City, and they all have a similar pattern, which is that there is a case of undue violence. There are protests, and sometimes they devolve into riots. There are calls for reform, and we are where we are, and George Floyd died. So, you know, you hope that this time it's going to be different, but I have to say, I'm not sure I'd bet on it.
Sonny?
Well, Trump is positioning himself as a law and order president, but these movements that we are seeing in the streets are protesting law enforcement as we know it. He's also reigniting the fight now over taking a knee in silent protest during the national anthem. Is this, in your view, the right tone for the president to be taking in this moment?
Well, I'm not going to talk about it in terms of right or wrong. I mean, you know, the president has his base and he has his beliefs and he's entitled to them. Let me talk about it in terms of politics. And I would say that the last week was a very bad week for the president in terms of politics, in terms of his potential reelection prospects. I mean, when you're getting called out by the Episcopal Bishop of Washington and the Archbishop of the Catholic Church of Washington, when you're getting called out, excuse me, by everybody from Jim Mattis to former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mike Mullen, and even your own current Secretary of Defense, Mike Esper, breaks with you, that's not a good week. He had some good news on the economy, but clearly, and you see there's a new poll in the Washington Post today that indicates by an almost 2-to-1 margin, people don't think the president has handled the last week properly, and his approval ratings and his standing in the polls has dropped. So, you know, you can argue as to whether he's right or wrong, but politically, I think it's been a bad week.
Chris, Fox News is the most watched cable news outlet in the country. Nearly 70% of congressional districts, yet some Democrats have refused to appear on the network. And the DNC barred Fox from hosting a Democratic primary debate. I was actually surprised to hear candidates say that they wouldn't come on during the election. I thought it was a completely missed opportunity. Why should Democrats do more to reach out to the Fox News viewer?
Wow, I like that question. Well, you know, it's the same reason or explanation that Willie Sutton gave for robbing banks. That's where the money is. There are, as you say, it's the top news network. It's the top basic cable network. You know, we beat TNT and ESPN. And it isn't, you know, despite what some people may think, it isn't all just right-wing Republicans. There's a very large percentage that are independents, that are conservative Democrats, and anybody is going to need the Fox vote, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, to win the election. We saw what happened when the Democrats ignored an awful lot of Fox viewers, or, you know, in the constituency they stand for in 2016. It's interesting, the candidates who appeared on Fox and the candidates who didn't appear on Fox. Bernie Sanders appeared, Pete Buttigieg appeared. An awful lot of the ones who went by the wayside, like Cory Booker and Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, refused to appear on Fox. I'm not saying why that's why they lost, but boycotting Fox sure didn't help.
Okay, well, there are plenty of Republicans who won't appear on MSNBC, too, so it works both ways, doesn't it? But that's not my question. My question is this. You spent 6 years in the White House press corps during the Reagan administration, and we've seen the press secretary berate journalists on the types of questions they should be asking, name-calling from Trump. He's called the press, which you are part of, the enemy of the people. What do you think of that, sir? How do you feel as a member of the press corps being called the enemy of the people?
I think it's awful. I think it's one of the most, as I've said, and this is not the first time I've said it, but I'll say it again, Joy. I think this president is involved in the most concerted campaign against the media in history. Now, I said that in a speech, and somebody wrote me and said, well, wait a minute, what about John Adams and the Sedition Act in 1800? And I said, you know what? I stand corrected. John Adams was involved in the most concerted campaign against the media. Donald Trump was number 2. Having said that, I do want to say this, that I think that some of the media has gone too far in response. You talk about those White House briefings. I'm not very happy about them from either side. I think that it's much too contentious on the part of Kayleigh McEnany, the press secretary, and I think much too contentious on the part of a lot of the White House reporters. You know, I was there covering Reagan with Sam Donaldson and Leslie Stahl. We didn't go easy, but, you know, we were basically trying to get information, and I think the White House press secretaries at the time under Reagan basically were trying to dispense information. Now it seems to have become a kind of food fight or ritualized performance where the press secretary is trying to play gotcha with the reporters and the reporters are trying to play gotcha with the press secretary, and I don't think the American people are served very well by either side.